call the Town of Mountain View Council Workshop Meeting of September 8th, 2025 to order at 6:30 p.m. Will the town clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Mitchum,
Here.
Councilmember Algeen, Councilmember Bailey,
Here.
Councilmember Debner,
Here.
Councilmember Dennis,
Here.
Councilmember Lasher. Here. Councilmember Unger.
We have a quorum. Did we hear Councilmember Dennis on your computer?
I muted it because of the feedback issues, but she
Okay.
did state that she was here.
Okay, so for the record, Councilmember Dennis told the clerk that she's here and we have some technical issues with the sound, but she is attending remotely. Per our rules, I want to reiterate at the beginning of this meeting that no audible interruptions are permitted. For members of the public, the only time to speak is during the public comment period. And I would ask that all members be respectful and avoid audible interruptions of the meeting as it causes significant delay and distraction. Members of the public who do audibly interrupt the meeting will be given one warning. And I'll ask you kindly to leave the room if you interrupt the meeting again after that. And then we'll welcome you to join the meeting virtually in that case. One more issue for the record before we start. You'll notice that our Public Works Coordinator is not with us. He's decided to retire prior to the election. Yes.
Was he planning on retiring or was it just the election or?
This is a personnel matter, so I'm only able to share that he was asked to complete a workplace conduct training. And prior to such completion, I received notice stating that he's retiring effective immediately. So we'll just keep it at that. Moving on then, we are at our public comment period and I'll summarize the rules. We'll ask people to sign up on the clipboard, or they can sign up in the chat and use the chat feature, put in their name and contact information. Please turn your camera on for the duration of the comment if you are able to. We're still testing this new webinar system. If you're not able to, let us know. And although you won't get a response from us in this meeting, someone will follow up with you after the meeting if you have a specific question. Public comment provides the residents with opportunities to address the council on matters of importance to them. And comments are an official part of the record and help inform council's decision-making. I may provide brief factual clarifications or direct staff to follow up, but council and staff generally do not engage in dialogue or respond to comments during the meeting. Issues requiring research or policy discussion are really better shared during our numerous public forums, which is specifically why we created those forums, so that members of the public could have a less limited back and forth conversation with their elected representatives. Do we have anybody signed up in the room for public comment?
Charlene Pelton.
You may come up to the mic and speak right into the mic, Charlene Pelton. And you can just say if you're a resident or not a resident for the record.
Charlene Pelton, and I'm a resident.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to address, thank you for painting the lines at all the stop signs. I appreciate that. That was it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Has anybody else in the room signed up? Do we have anybody who's attending remotely who would like to make a public comment? If so, you may either raise your hand or put your name and contact information in the chat.
There is no one.
Okay. So then we will give the floor. Next on our agenda is the zoning update discussion, and we will give the floor to our town attorney to discuss his proposal for our zoning update and give us quite a lot of information, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Oh, that was right. Okay. So I'm gonna go through fairly briefly a quick overview of some of the issues in your current code. Oh, sorry.
It really helps.
So I'm gonna go through briefly some of the issues in the current code, and talk about some big picture solutions. Again, we're just talking about zoning and subdivision, which folks will just call your land use code. And so that's how I'll refer to it, your land use code, which includes all your zoning and subdivision regulations. Right now, they're housed in two places. It's housed in chapter 16 and chapter 17. Generally, although you have a little smorgasbord of other zoning requirements in other places in your code, but generally they're in chapter 16 and chapter 17. So altogether, if you just pull those two sections out, those two chapters out, it brings you to about 200 pages. So you got about 200 pages of zoning and subdivision regulations. So you might ask why? Why do we have such lengthy regulations in the town? Well, a lot of it has to do with repetition. So if you were to ask the question, can I have a duplex in my zoning district? You would think, all right, I'm in R2, I should probably just have to go to R2. And you will find some uses there, but you won't find them all there. You'll also find them down here in permitted uses, and you'll also find them here in conditional and temporary uses. So you'll answer that question in three places. And that's true just if you're in R2. So if you're in R3, you'll answer it in an additional place. And if you're in C1, you'll answer it in an additional place. You're in a PD, you got another place. So really, we have 7 different places where we answer that one question. And that is just an example of sort of the issue we got to in this code, and that it just kept ballooning over time. We kept doing, it seems at least, that there kept being sort of Band-Aid and Band-Aid solutions without comprehensively looking at these regulations. So organizationally, there's some issues, that to say. But it's also that the regulations themselves are fairly outdated. So if we just go down to your permitted uses, just to get an idea of what's allowed where, you'll see that there's a lot of specificity in places, but then also a lot of broad uses in other places. And you'll see it's very auto-centric. It's a lot of fast food type uses, and it's a lot of auto-oriented uses. So that to say, there's this issue as well of the regulations really being drafted for zoning circa like 1990, I would say, is what is sort of most typical of this, of your zoning regulations substantively. And that's not only true with your uses as I just described, it's also true of your dimensional and development standards. So we'd be looking at, for instance, parking lots at the front of the lot. So it would go sidewalk, parking lot, and then whatever commercial use it is, rather than sidewalk commercial use, so the pedestrian doesn't have to go through the vehicle traffic area and then parking in the back. What I just described in the latter case is more common, to sort of have those separate entrances, separate ways for vehicles to access a lot and pedestrians to access a lot.
More common in current zoning codes?
Yes, I should say
Most
more
updated,
modern.
More
at
modern.
least. Yeah. Okay, and then within the actual sections, and you'll see this, council has seen this over the several years we've been working together, is that whenever we touch a section, we take it from something that's typically pretty lengthy, so a lot of words to describe something, to something that's a little more succinct. So your chapter 16 and 17 suffer from that same issue as well. It's kind of written in block paragraphs. And that's kind of true throughout your code, and we've been sort of undoing that as we go about the changes, but haven't looked at it comprehensively for your zoning. And then the other thing is organizationally, there's not really a structure here. So in modern codes, you'll have what's called ground up zoning. So it's looking at it from the developer's point of view of taking a piece of raw land and what it's going to take to get that raw land completely developed. And so that's typically how it's organized from subdivision. How are you going to divide out the lots if you need to? How are you going to put the buildings on the lot, including the site improvements like parking and landscaping? And then how do you get those things approved? So your current zoning, it actually has a smorgasbord of, you'll talk about procedures in several of these different sections. And you'll talk about the same subject sort of over and over, but it's not even just contained here. There's actually some slippage in some of the other chapters. Okay, so that's what we got. So how do we solve it and how might it look? So I threw together just really quickly how your new code might look organizationally.
Let me just real quickly interrupt for some context. So we've been talking about zoning commercial areas, right? And thinking about that particular property that the town purchased, how to rezone it so that we attract development that creates a revenue stream for the town. So when we're thinking about that, we're also thinking comprehensively about, does that mean this is also the time that we look at the full zoning code? So that's why we're giving you this presentation, to think about that question. Are we just zoning that property, or are we looking at the full context of our zoning? How does council want to proceed? So we're trying to just sort of start that conversation.
Yeah, I missed that. That's a good point. So at our last council meeting, we had that discussion. Council said, like, absolutely, we want to move forward with that commercial corridor. We need to get that commercial corridor more vibrant, more online, generate more sales tax. And we had the conversation with, it's going to be really hard for you to do another Band-Aid on this gushing wound. And you're also going to be left with some other issues. So for instance, say you just created a new, or just changed your commercial district, or just created a new district for that redevelopment area and zoned those areas into that new district. You would still be left with a transition that's maybe not in line with that new development. In other words, those properties that are right next to what you foresee as your new commercial corridor are still going to be stuck with this old kind of zoning. And there might be ways that we can sort of protect those historic residential properties through a comprehensive sort of look at your zoning. And we call that in a lot of modern codes transitional zoning. Transitional from sort of higher density commercial mixed use development to lower density historic type residential uses.
And I want to be clear, we're not criticizing the past code for zoning. We're saying that there's a modern way of doing it, and maybe it's time with council approval to modernize it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think really zoning is changed throughout time. It's supposed to sort of be a living document. The problem with a living document that doesn't have an organization that sort of is a bit more coherent is you're going to look to multiple places for one answer, and you're probably still not going to have a clear idea of, wait, what's the answer? Because this says that and this says that.
So it decreases the likelihood of developers saying, what's it going to cost for me to get from idea to actual having a store that's producing funds for my company? They know it's going to be more expensive because it takes more work.
Yeah, not only is there, what developers will tell you is, I'll pay the more additional funds up front. If you want higher design, if you want a certain type of uses, I'll pay you for that. Give me predictability. And so that's part of the piece we're missing, is that predictability of what actually are you permitted to do. That's kind of issue one, I would say, generally. And issue two is what you're allowed to do in conformance with sort of a more modern mixed use development.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just quickly threw this together to show like kind of how the organization of your code could be reworked. So we could look at sort of just a, trying to zoom in here. Okay. So basically what you do, or what I would recommend, is a more modern approach, is house sort of all your general provisions in one section. You don't have to repeat them in each section. We'll go down to our zoning district. So you'll answer the question of what zone district am I in? We go down to uses to describe what am I allowed to do in that zone district. And then you'll go down to dimensional and development standards of asking, how do I have to build it? What does it have to look like? And then you'll go down to the last question, which is, and now how do I get it approved? And just real quickly to show sort of what maybe a more modern use table would look like, it would be broken down into these categories, and you'd have each zoning district next to each other. So you can see, as you're making a policy decision, and property owners can see, okay, I'm in R2. That's our least dense neighborhood. I'm gonna have the least amount of permitted uses here and probably the most restrictions on redevelopment. And then as I move right, the opposite is gonna be true. And then we'd break it down into these categories of, I know I want to build something residential. What residential uses are permitted? And then we'd move down to sort of public uses like art galleries, commercial uses like hotels, and so on and so forth. Okay. So with that, I had two main questions for council in moving forward today. How do you want to scope this project? Do you want to tackle the entire land use code? And again, when I say that, I'm saying all regulations that really touch the regulation of land use, zoning and subdivision, chapter 16 and 17 for sure, but a couple of other sections throughout the code. Do you want to tackle that big problem? Or is it something lesser along the lines? Maybe you do just want to look at your commercial district. And again, the solution there would be quicker. If you're just going to do another sort of more band-aid solution, it's going to be a quicker solution. And on the other end, if you're going to do a comprehensive solution here, it's going to take more time and it's going to take more money. So that's kind of question one. How do you want to scope it? And the second question is, who do you want to do it? Do you want to go out to RFP for this work? Do you want my office to take the lead on it? Do you want Fairfoot and Woods to take the lead on it, or ask them to? And I guess within that second question of who you want to take the lead on it is how you want the changes to be tracked. And really there's two main options I would suggest for tracking those changes, each with very different cost outcomes. So the first one I'll call the breadcrumb approach. And in the breadcrumb approach, you are tracking every single change by footnote. So for instance, in your current code, you would take over every single sentence, move it into that new structure, even if it means you're kind of getting repetition on the front end. That'd be sort of your first step in the draft. Second step would be actually making the modifications and footnoting every modification. So for instance, maybe there's 3 places in your current code where it says single family dwellings are allowed in R2, which I absolutely wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. The footnote would say, this section consolidated the following sections, which generally permitted single family dwellings in this place. Or it might say, this section resolved a discrepancy where this section in your code said X and this other section in your code said Y. So that's what I call the breadcrumb approach. As you can imagine, it's a much more time-intensive process. It has the benefit of showing you, or tracking, I should say, every single change made. Okay, so that's breadcrumb approach. The second approach would be the repeal and replace approach. And that is saying, we know there's a couple sections in here we like and that we want to keep. You'd name those sections to say like, hey, or you could say like anything we've done in the last 2 years, we know we want to keep that, just move that forward verbatim. But everything else we know is probably fairly outdated. And here's how we want you to generally go about those changes. You might say, we want to keep one residential zone for all of our historic lots in town and just call that our historic residential zone. And essentially, maybe the goal of that zone district is don't change anything. Just keep it the exact way it is. Maybe you have another zone that's for your commercial corridors. And it's sort of an opposite approach of, we know we want this to be a more modern, mixed use, walkable area. So give us a zone district that has those types of uses and those types of standards. And perhaps when you look at that, you say, and I think there's something missing in between those two. So give us a zone district that transitions those historic lots to those commercial redeveloped lots. And if we'd go for that real repeal and replace process, the conversation I would suggest, again, depending on who you choose to do the work, is you'd go through each section as I just showed you in that new outline. And each section, for instance, when I do this work with other clients, we'd go through the use table, every single use in every single district. And I ask council, and we go around and we take polls. Is this right? Yep, that's right. Is this right? No, that's right. And if we don't get unanimous, we say, all right, we're going to talk about it. So it's still time intensive. You still absolutely know what the regulations are going to be, you might just have a little bit less of a view of how that's a one-to-one change from how they are today. But absolutely, if you say, tell us how it's different, they could do that work on the back end regardless, whoever you choose to do it. Does that make sense? Those two different, okay. Okay, so those are the two main questions I had for council. I'm happy to go into more depth with your current code or more depth with other examples of other codes, whatever's helpful.
Councilmember Debner?
So how does the Fairfield and Woods, with the survey coming out, how does that fit into changes to chapter 16, 17 here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we can fold those in, and I think this process is really apt in that way because we should be getting those recommendations soon.
So we've got the survey questions settled, and we're working on the mailing list. It should go out this week, the questionnaire. So I'd say in the next month, we should be able to have some final, if all goes smoothly, some final report.
So you
publicly
can
made.
definitely fold in those recommendations to this process and just make it a part of this process. That way you can sort of seamlessly integrate them. If you feel like we need to get these suggestions, in place today, you could leapfrog it and just do another Band-Aid to your current code, put those suggestions in place in your current code, and then fold them into the new organization later if that's what council chooses to do.
That could be one of those things that if we were doing an appeal and replace, repeal and replace, we could say, keep that whole section that we just worked on
Yeah, exactly.
and move it when it's time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
So that work definitely won't be lost.
But the question of how to do it is so complicated, right? Like whether or not we follow every line and say, we replaced or changed this line and here's a footnote. We replaced or changed this line and here's a footnote. That versus we're doing the entire thing. I think that the fear is going to be, I'm just going to try to call out the elephant in the room, is going to be, how long does this take? How much involvement is there for the community? Because the community's going to be interested in that breadcrumb approach, because then we know like exactly what happened, right? We can follow that through every step of the way after the fact. You can go back and look and say, oh, right, this is why, this is how it was done. So if there was an approach to do a full repeal and replace, what kind of timeline are we talking?
Yeah, and let me show you a quick example. So I
Mhm.
I used to be just a land use attorney, worked for a national firm before I moved over to my current firm representing local governments. This is from my previous work, and we worked in Rochester, Minnesota. We redid their land use code. I love it there. Have you been there? Yeah, that's so
I grew up just north of Rochester.
No
so,
way.
Yeah.
Man, I loved it there. Kindest people I've ever met. Okay, so they decided, yes, give us the breadcrumb approach. I'll tell you, they had a really huge budget. So it wasn't as much of a budgetary question for them. They went breadcrumb approach. This is how it would look. And just to give you an idea, there's 700 footnotes in this document. So you'd see like, hey, here's the source. It's from these two current sections in your current code. And here's exactly how we revised it. Okay, so cost differential, I'd say if you go breadcrumb approach, you're probably looking at about double the price tag.
Just because it takes more time?
Yeah, it takes
Mhm.
way more time. With the sort of repeal and replace, council can just say, we like, just to give another example, I just finished up Morrison's land use code, and whoever you choose is going to have a different approach. I'm just sharing mine, so I guess keep that in mind. And Morrison said like, hey, we know we don't have much to work with in our current zoning code. Just get rid of it. And let's go through every single step of what we want it to look like moving forward. So we basically started from scratch there, where they said like, throw almost everything away. But one of the things they kept was community meetings. They had done a lot of work on like how they require, or when they required community meetings through certain applications. And they said, that section we like, we just tweak that, bring that forward. Like everything else, you can just get rid of. As context, Morrison got their zoning code. They literally copied and pasted it from Denver's in the 1990s. So pretty big difference, Morrison, Denver. So it's incredible it worked that well for them for that long. We went through the repeal and replace. It took about a year in total, the entire process, and we came in below budget. They budgeted just under 50,000 for it, which is probably lower than what you would need to do if you went out to bid. And we came in under budget, but partially, I would say, because of that process. And we did 8 community meetings. So we did not shy away from the public engagement piece, even though it was sort of a repeal and replace tactic. And the community had total buy-in. There was no public comments when we went to adopt that were negative. All of them were positive. And you can talk to the folks in Morrison now. They've seen a huge interest in redeveloping their commercial corridor since then, and they're poised to get their first hotel. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm picturing if we did the repeal and replace, we would have 8 to 10 workshops with public engagement. And I think what I heard is Morrison started their meetings early. And so they didn't add another meeting, but they added an hour to the beginning of the meeting.
Correct. So when they decided like, hey, we need to do this, we need to do something about our sales tax was a big part of the issue. And like, we don't understand our code at all. Like, we don't know how to even apply it to developers. You know, when they got the questions coming in, they didn't know how to answer them. So they knew they had a big problem. They started, when they made the decision, like, we've got to do this, we want it as, you know, fast tracked as possible. They made the decision to do it in 2 phases. They did their zoning first to get that off the ground to essentially get the hotel in, to not delay that future revenue source, which worked. And the phase 2 was subdivision. So that helped them substantively, but it kind of slowed down the process generally doing it in those 2 phases. And they decided at that point as well to start, I think it was every other meeting, we started an hour early. And we got through as much as we could in that hour. So we started every other meeting at 5 p.m. and it was a workshop where like the public was engaged and, you know, obviously council was. And we would take on individual topics. And I would give them the topics beforehand. So I tell them, hey, like today, we're going to cover zoning districts. Here's my proposal based off like prior council direction. Here's what it means. I'm looking for feedback on X, Y, and Z. Because you only have an hour and because typically folks want to get through this process quicker, keeping it as targeted as possible is also really important.
And then for zoning changes, by the time you get through those workshops, you have a public hearing when you're adopting the changes?
Yeah. So once you actually have an adoption draft where you bring together the entire process and you're ready to repeal in place, chapter 16, 17, and there's going to be a handful of other sections for the town that will repeal at the same time. Then yeah, it's a public hearing with 2 readings.
So to council who's attending remotely, as well as our council members at the table, this is a lot of information, right? Building on a prior conversation. So not always easy to like pull those threads through. Is everybody clear on why this is at the table right now? Let's just sort of, can I hear from all 4 of you in terms of the first question, how to scope it? Are you more inclined to say, we've got an urgent development on Benton, the town just bought this property, let's just zone that and take this big issue, this big process, and put it in the future? Or are you more inclined to look at it in a comprehensive way at this point? And I'll start with the people in the room and then move to our remote participant.
Me.
Councilmember Lasher.
I'm more inclined to look at it comprehensively. I feel like if we just do it in pieces, then we're just going to be putting Band-Aids on things. And I feel like that's not what we want. And it's been our council goal forever to bring in sales tax revenue from all angles. So I feel like doing it all together is going to give us a better picture, like Austin or are we calling you Austin? The
Yeah.
attorney said, of, you know, like how we can zone things where it's like if a house is next to it, like that's what I think is gonna give our town a better like flow and everything. And then can we answer the second question too, or just want to?
Sure.
Okay. I don't think we should do the breadcrumb thing. I'm always one for like the fiscal responsibility and to pay more. If we're doing it in a public setting, community members are allowed to come. We're, you know, obviously, then we're going to be having the public hearing. So I don't think that we need to spend more just to have breadcrumbs. And I also think that reading something with breadcrumbs everywhere is going to be confusing to some people. So, and I also don't think we should use, can we answer who we think should do it? Yeah. I don't think we should use Fairfield and Woods, personally. I really think that either putting it in RFP or having, Mr. Flanagan's firm
can
do
call
it,
him
just since he
Winston.
knows us and
Yeah.
he knows what we want. And I think it would just be like very easy to work together before a meeting.
Mhm.
That's my.
Thank you. Councilmember Debner or Mayor Pro Tem Bailey?
Yeah, I second a lot of what Councilmember Lasher said. I definitely think we've been doing the bandit approach too often. I would say though that I know we were talking about the commercial, but I want to speak to the residential too, because I think that if we're going to do a Band-Aid on anything, it should be on the residential, on those issues there, because it wouldn't be work that we would lose. It's just, if we did the repeal and replace, it would be pretty seamless, like you said, to just stick it in now. And then when we're doing a more comprehensive approach, just take what we've already written and plop it back into the new code. I am personally a huge fan of breadcrumbs, but I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I think it depends upon how much of our existing code is salvageable. Like, I mean, I can't answer that question. I mean, maybe Austin, maybe you can speak to that. Like, I mean, what percentage are we talking here with the land use code? Because if it's truly a situation like was similar to Morrison, where they're like, we only have a few sections that really are warranted to carry over, and it's easier to start fresh, then it would make more sense to do that than a breadcrumb approach. I like being my academic person that I am. I like tracking changes and seeing change over time, but it may not make any sense to do that.
So it's definitely a Gordian knot, your current code. So like once we start pulling a thread, you're gonna need to unravel the whole thing. And so with that, there's no section, there's definitely some language in there that you can bring over. And there's a lot of ideas in there that you definitely will want to bring over. But there's no section that will be untouched. Like I think it's actually, like in Morrison, I could like copy paste that one section. Like it was in good shape. That section could be just brought in verbatim. I'm not seeing as much of that with the town's code.
So I guess,
Asked a question, since we heard from Councilmember Lasher on all three questions, really. Question one was how to scope it. You're saying comprehensive, but with maybe a fast track for the residential work that we've already started because of the urgency that we're hearing from our community.
Yeah, I want to start where we finished, and then I really think we need to make this the very next top level priority.
Mhm. And then as to question two, who to do it? Do you have a sense where, and you're not getting married to this answer. We're just trying to take everybody's temperature right
Just like off the top of my head, it would make sense if we followed something that was sort of similar to what Morrison did, just because we have an attorney at the table who is incredibly familiar with land use code, and it just would be, it could be like a sort of more efficient process. I'm also not opposed to doing an RFP, and you know, if in Fairfield Woods would be welcome to respond to that, of course, but I don't think we should just go with them just because we went with them before.
now. Mhm.
So I think it should be a competitive process if we do decide to go that route.
Okay. And how to track the changes, you're still saying, I want to make sure I heard you, the repeal and replace.
Yeah, I think the repeal and replace makes more sense, just because, I mean, just even though with my analytical brain, I like to see all the different changes. And
Right.
so the breadcrumb approach is really appealing to me, but not in our situation.
Thank you. Councilmember Debner.
I would also agree with Mayor Pro Tem Bailey that as much as my personal preference might be to breadcrumb it, if we're working with, you know, kind of a 1990s version of code, I think the repeal and replace from a comprehensive perspective would really benefit us in the community. I also want to recognize that, considering the residential code concerns, a quick Band-Aid for that, I think would really satisfy a lot of our resident needs. And, just considering the recent changes, want to advocate for transparency and being really intentional about getting community involvement in this process, because we're a small town. And when change happens, that can be concerning for some. And I think it'd be in our best interest to just get everyone at the table.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe really this is the kind of thing that we do a lot of public, like lay the groundwork for those conversations and give people sort of the bird's eye view and a calendar ahead of time and invite everybody to the table with a flyer and some brochures and stuff like that. Cause it's a big project. Are you talking, so you're in line with the other two council members at the table that a more comprehensive approach with a fast track for the residential piece makes sense to you, and the repeal and replaces makes sense to you given the circumstances?
Yeah, we would likely see a cost savings without having to get into the details about old code. It just, as long as we're transparent with the public and going out, getting engagement, I think the repeal and replace portion would be fine.
How do you feel about the RFP versus just our current town attorney? Do you have a gut feeling there?
I think it would be wise to maybe get some bids, just to consider. I think, more information would be helpful to hear, just kind of additional perspectives, especially if we could do like kind of a cost comparison and timeline comparison and what it would look like to kind of do it in-house and ourselves versus a request for pricing.
If we did an RFP, would your firm bid on it? Like, how would that work? That doesn't seem quite right.
Oh, we can talk about it more. I think, yeah, we can talk about it more. I hadn't quite
Okay.
thought through it. We typically don't bid on these projects. I get only the work from referrals now, so I've never bid on a land use code project since I've been with my last firm. But I've probably done at least 10 at my current firm just all through referrals. But we can talk through that. I mean, my initial reaction is like, you're out to RFP, see if you have anyone you like, and if you don't, let's have the conversation again.
I wonder,
Might slow things down, but
is there a way that you could, without like doing a formal bid, is there a way that you could sort of cost out just like a guess
yeah, I mean,
on costs, like just based upon like what you've done with other clients?
yeah, I mean, I can tell you that I think I think they budgeted 50,000. I think they got 25 from DOLA. So it was a 25 match. And I think we actually came in at like 40. But I will say a huge caveat there is like, it was pretty seamless. Like we had the public buy into, almost everything. We literally sat at a round table and it was like the same, 20, 30 people that came every meeting. We advertised it to everyone, but it was the same like 20, 30 people. And we were able to get to decisions pretty quickly. So it's a huge caveat. How I've seen some of these projects kind of balloon in cost is when you just don't have strong buy-in, when there's really big differences about what your community wants to see and trying to address those, because it just becomes, you have to put in a little bit more time and energy to try to address them if you've got really divergent views.
I want to make sure that we don't, that we give some time for.
Yeah.
Business.
I was just going to piggyback off on what Austin had said. I kind of wonder, like, if before we even dive into like putting the RFP out there, we have like a couple listening sessions with our community and kind of get, take the temperature on like what they think of, mixed use development and all those kinds of things, because it may not make the sense to go down this path. I mean, it does economically, it makes a heck of a lot of sense, but I just feel like maybe we have a conversation before we put it out there, so it doesn't cost so much money in the end. I mean, I know we need to do it, and I'm a huge proponent of doing it. I just, maybe we have a conversation to just sort of dip our toe in.
I really like that idea.
Can I guess I'm just confused.
I feel like we're
Mayor-
getting off track
Oh.
here. I want to make sure that we hear from all four. I'm gonna bookmark that and come back to it later because I think that's a bigger conversation.
Yeah.
Councilmember Dennis.
Yeah,
On those three
not really. Oh,
questions, how to scoop it, who to do it, and how to track the changes.
can you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me now?
It's
very
low. Very low. And then all the way. You can hear her from there.
Yeah, I'm having some audio issues, I think, on my end
Let's
as
have
well.
her call
From
in,
what I've
because
been
we
able
can't hear
to
her.
hear, I'm not really a fan of breadcrumbing. But I think maybe if we
I'm
look at
sorry, Councilmember Dennis, can you call my phone and I'll put you up to the mic that way.
okay.
We tested this earlier and it did work. I could be connected on my phone and everybody could hear it in the room. No, because she's hearing it on that computer. And if we. Okay, Councilmember Dennis, you have the floor.
Okay, yeah, I've been having some audio issues on my end as well, but from what I can understand from the conversation, I think it's a good idea if we look at this more comprehensively. And I do want to mirror what Mayor Pro Tem Bailey had stressed, is get some more community input. I think maybe having another conversation might be helpful in the situation. Excuse me if I'm out of line. I'm also having some audio issues, but that's kind of my hot take on it at the moment.
That's helpful. So what about question number 2, who to do it?
Who to do it? I mean, I have faith in our town attorney. I'm also open to, I don't know, I'm not quite sure.
You
what
don't
our
have enough
options would be
information
at
yet.
that point.
Okay. And in terms of tracking the changes, given the information that you currently have in terms of like the breadcrumb approach versus the repeal and replace, do you have a gut feeling there?
Mostly, I'm more in favor of repeal and replace, to be honest.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna keep you on the phone so that if you want to weigh in, you can ask for the floor and weigh in on the phone. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. It's kind of hard because it echoes on my end too. So I'm gonna have to like turn my audio off on the laptop in order to make that work.
You can just text and say you want to talk if you'd prefer. It's up to you.
Okay.
She can also just turn it on.
Right, then she can't hear it. Okay, just text if you want to weigh in and I'll try to make space for you every time, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So it sounds like we need a little bit more information in terms of the, what it looks like to go out to RFP and what the risks versus the benefits are of simply handing the job to our town attorney. And a little bit more information about the costs there. We do have some ideas that we could get. Do you want to talk to that issue? The grant idea?
Oh, the bill.
Mhm.
Well, so that will be part of the budget discussion. So
Yeah.
that's part of the 3-year CIP plan.
Yeah, so there is some possibility that we could get a similar kind of deal with the split cost where DOLA would give us a grant for half of it and we would provide half, and we were sort of thinking 30 or 40 for, but let's bring that back with a more comprehensive look because we're hearing that there's not enough information there. And then in terms of the issue for how to speak about the larger project, maybe what we could do like with the community, right? Like the council table knows these are our goals. They're all printed out. We've looked at them. We've adopted them by resolution. We know that one of the most important things we can do, probably the most important thing we can do, is diversify our revenue. And in order to do that, what it's going to take is this work so that developers can see our commercial areas as viable places to come and put their money and develop, and then that feeds into our long-term plans. So we know that at this table because we've had this conversation over the last 4 years at least, and before that, I think, as well.
Yeah, it's been a topic for as long as I've been on council.
Mhm. But I'm hearing that the council's not they're not 100% sure that there's buy-in in the community for that because there's not understanding about that.
That's exactly my, yeah. It's not that I just think people don't, we haven't presented it in a way, it hasn't sunk in a way that the importance matters to the community.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, Councilmember Lasher.
I just feel like, we're all elected officials here, and it's like we were elected to like lead the town, to set the town up for years to come. So it's like trying to like, oh, we need to have a meeting to get the buy-in. It's like I view it as like we're the leaders that are saying like, this is what we're doing, and we're explaining it to like our groups of people, not like, well, what do you think? Okay, well, they don't want to do that, so we're not going to do that. It's like we've made these council goals, and everything that we're doing is working towards our council goals. So it's like at some point, like, yes, I love community engagement. I love talking to neighbors and hearing what they think. But on some point, if my neighbor says, I don't think this is a good idea, I take their input, but I still am like, I'm going to be a leader, and I'm going to know that doing these things is what our town needs to set us up for success for 20 years.
And I agree with that. I just also think that it will be a more expedient and more efficient process if we kind of grab people by the hand and kind of help them, lead them along the path and let them see like why we're doing this. Like, I don't know, if we had like maybe a presentation at a workshop from a developer who said like, hey, look at our land use code and tell me, would you come here and develop in Mountain View given the current code? And they would probably be like, well, no, because I don't even know what I can do because it's so disorganized and you're repeating yourself in 3 different places, like our town attorney said. But I mean, let's hear it from the developer maybe, and like have a presentation from somebody who's boots on the ground and does this all the time. And so it kind of like, it might make the picture clearer to our residents. And I'd rather like hold their hand and walk them along the same path than kind of like drag them behind us.
Okay.
It's kind of my perspective.
I think, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think behind that is like, look at your commercial corridor. That is what's allowed. So if you have a question of what your code means, you can look at it. That's what it is.
If a hotel wanted to locate on 44th right now,
There's no way you give them enough buildable size. It's gonna be 60% of parking lot. They'd get like 3 rooms.
I mean, that's the thing, is that it's not that complicated. That's the thing. I think let's schedule one meeting where it's a public meeting to talk about why we're doing this while we're continuing to work on the residential zoning. Because we all know we're all on the same page with the residential zoning. That needs to move forward. We've got a lot of pieces already in place for that. And maybe we can sort of, do something in the middle where we're not doing all of the, I don't know, a little bit of a compromise. We have a meeting with the community to really go sort of like the PowerPoint presentation that we did with the property purchases.
Yeah, and we had lots of comments that was an incredibly beneficial presentation, and it helped sort of like open the eyes of the community, and I think they understood what was going on a lot better after that presentation.
But we also weren't hiding it from them. It's
Right.
like when you're saying like you want to walk, you want to hold their hand or like walk along with them, not drag them. It's like, we're not doing anything that's not public. We're not making these decisions in a back room and then they're saying, why did you do this? Like the whole step of the way, everything is public. They have the same, they can read our schedule of what's going to be an event. They know exactly. It's not like we're hiding anything from them.
Right. Okay, I'm going to put a stop to this because we'll just go back and forth. If everybody's okay, let's move on. I think we've gotten a lot of information and I really appreciate the presentation that you gave. I think it's really, really informative and it gets the ball a little bit further down the field. We're not making any big decisions here. We've gathered a lot of information. I think we have, do you feel like we have enough staff direction to know what we do next?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Okay.
Let's talk about sort of what that community engagement piece would look like at the outset. I mean, to be quite honest, like that's what I was intending today to be, to
Mhm.
understand your code, understand how it's different from a modern code. So I think, you can hire someone else to do that. Absolutely. Barefoot and Woods did do that with your zoning. You can hire someone else. You can get,
I could probably put together a presentation with the help of some developers that really makes the case and then we can share it and do a public presentation about why Mountain View is not moving forward commercially.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
I think it would be helpful to have, just kind of historically, because I do believe Fairfield and Woods had some elements of this topic in their presentation. So just kind of outlining historically what conversations we had when and what resources are available. So if residents have questions, they can kind of, do some more digging on their own and just kind of lay the groundwork for them for their own understanding. And then honestly, like maybe we just put a PowerPoint together of this conversation we had tonight, something like that.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be like something crazy, like, crazy extensive. I just feel like that PowerPoint with the properties just, I feel like it answered a lot of questions. And I feel like people have a much greater understanding of, why we did what we did. I mean, they may not agree with it, but at least they understand it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Makes sense.
Thank you. Councilmember Dennis. We okay moving forward? I'm going to assume since your camera's off. Okay. All right. So we are going on to our next workshop topic, which is our budget discussion. And this is our third workshop on the budget. So thank you to everybody for continuing to persist and join us for our fiscal year 2026 budget workshop number 3. Tonight's session is a chance for the council to review the draft proposed budget, ask questions, and share ideas before we move to formal hearings and adoption. No decisions are made in this workshop because it's a workshop. And it's really about getting our budget priorities aligned very closely with, again, our council goals so that we feel confident with the budget as we move into the first reading. And with that, I will turn it over to our town clerk treasurer, Charity Campfield, to walk us through the presentation.
So I have a few changes that I want to highlight that were made since the budget retreat. First and foremost, you will see.
Can you speak right into the mic? You might want to bring it up. Yeah, sorry about that.
You'll see a change in the administrative staff's salaries. We have switched some of that up to reflect some of it coming out of your enterprise fund due to the staff time that comes out of that specific fund. I think it will balance and give you a more accurate cost as to what it takes to provide that service. The chief and I have had lengthy discussions about the police salaries. And we have made an administrative decision to put a salary freeze on the police department for fiscal year 2026. That means that there will be no raises, but they will still receive their staff bonuses and all of their benefits as usual.
In this draft proposal to council, right? That's what this is reflecting.
Staff has decided to allocate similar budget numbers for your contracted services like your building official, your town attorney, your town accountant. This is due to the fact that we're still building an administrative foundation with the current staff that you have. So we don't know if those costs will actually go down based on the staff that you have currently brought in. So I thought it would be best to just keep the pay for those the same. So we don't have any way to, I guess, adjust for a change until we know what that foundation is going to look like. We have decided to do a 3-year CIP budget. This was based off of council direction. I think you guys want to see on paper the next 3 years of what we're not only planning with.
Capital improvement.
Yep. Planning with our police department, the properties we've purchased, and town hall facilities. So that way we can start allocating funds towards those goals. We have presented the budget with the new mayor's salary and the administrative staff we currently have. This means that we are not proposing a town administrator at this time. Basically because we need some considerations for future charter amendments. I did not include any revenue for the proposed lodging tax that will be on the ballot this November. I was being just fiscally conservative in case it did not pass, and I did not want to reflect that revenue prematurely. I did not use any of the conservation trust funds to pay for park maintenance, although in prior years it was stated that you wanted to save those dollars. We could move some of our park maintenance fees from the conservation trust fund and away from the general fund. So that is an option for you guys to consider. The capital improvement plan in the general fund for year 1, for consistency sake, includes following projects as capital investments, architectural services for a new town hall complex, and then as well as the zoning code updates. And we're offsetting those with potential grant funding. And then
Is that assuming that we have our town attorney doing it and it's not going out to RFP? Is that sort of the
That's-
broad stroke there?
that was assuming, but that is also a fluid number because the current grant opportunity we have to apply for by the 22nd of this month will provide 50% of this work. So we have to have kind of a basis of the cost. And then per charter section 9.2 requirements, a proposed budget for the ensuing fiscal year shall be presented to the council at the first regular meeting in September. So
Do you have a bullet point on terms of the photo radar, how you made those recommendations
I
based
did
on that?
not do a bullet point on the photo radar. So we have had very lengthy internal discussions on the revenue and the cost. The chief and I thought it would be best to be very conservative with those revenue numbers based off of all of the different variables of receiving those funds. And so right now we're looking at a projected $50,000 of income for fiscal year 25 for that. I don't foresee it going up a whole lot because the goal is to have compliance and reduce the tickets, and the cost is still going to remain the same. So I was very, very conservative with those revenue numbers.
Thank you. Okay. Council discussion. What kinds of questions, concerns, comments do you have based on this proposed version of the budget? Councilmember Debner.
So the first question that I had, so you had mentioned that we're taking for the clerk, admin clerk, public works and public works staff, a part of their salaries out of the wastewater fund. Could you maybe describe how that allocation was decided? And if, I mean, I imagine we might need that for like audit purposes, like how much work is actually spent doing, that work related to the wastewater?
So the way I calculated it is for the public works staff, it's 25% of their time is coming out of the wastewater fund. For the clerk and the administrative clerk, it's about 15% of your time. So in terms of the clerk, all the work on the budget, that's part of your wastewater budget. So that's time coming out of that department. Utility billing for the administrative clerk, since it's done quarterly, that's why it's a 15% of his time. And then also overseeing the execution of the utility bills by the clerk. That all factors into that. In terms of public works, the meter reads and locates and things like that, we calculated about how much time they spend doing those types of activities. Also grant writing, things like that. So,
Thank you.
mhm.
I don't know.
Councilmember Lasher?
Just a few questions. You mentioned that we could take the park maintenance out of the, like lotto fund, is
The
that?
Conservation
Yeah.
Trust Fund.
So we hadn't ever done that because we were trying to save up for a park, but we just got our park, like evaluated and they said it was like good to go. So is that something that like we would want to do? Like I would be all for taking money out of that for the park maintenance to bring our budget down. Then my other question was, you know, in our goals, like we really wanted to like, I think like having the police department be a huge part of our town. That was like a huge goal of the council and like a lot of community members support that. I feel like we already have a lot of turnover with police just because of our climate, police climate right now. Is that something if we're taking raises away, where are we going to lose? Is it going to be harder to get? Because I feel like it's already hard to find officers.
You know, I think we all come at this at a couple of different angles. I think looking over these numbers, I think I think this is the responsible thing to do. I do. Is there a risk? Yeah, there is. I can tell you when I proposed this to the staff, they continue to surprise me. They were, I can't say they were all smiles and giggles, but I can tell you that they understand the situation.
Okay. And then I just have one other question. I feel like there's a lot of talk about people saying that we're going to be broke in 2 years, but I haven't heard any like ideas thrown out like of what we could do to make sure we don't go broke. I know that like my big goal is like diversifying sales tax revenue, so we're getting income from other sources and other things. I feel like I've always been, you know, I feel like our council has always been very fiscally responsible, and a lot of past council members, that was like always our thing. So to hear that we're gonna, you know, be, you know, broke and have to, you know, join with Wheat Ridge, I'm just curious, like what other things like you guys are hearing or anyone's hearing or has ideas of things we can do. So I don't know if anyone wants to jump in on that.
Well, I think the inclusion of what's the term for that? The spreadsheet that is now going to be included in the packets with, you know, how much we've
Financial statements.
yeah, the financial statement. I think that's a really good first step. Just it'll give us visibility and residents visibility on where we're at. So that's just from a visibility standpoint. So I think that's a good step that we've already taken.
So more communication rather than trying to solve the budget problems that they're perceiving. It's the communication about how we're not in a dire straits.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's part of it. As far as like ideas, I think, you know, just close monitoring that, you know, the closer that we can monitor where we're at throughout the year, I think then we can kind of pivot decision making to, you know, be more conservative if we need to. So I guess that would be a solution that I would kind of offer up.
I'm gonna let our town clerk speak here.
I would be hesitant to use the word "we're broke." Right.
I don't use that word. I'm just trying to.
I would just like to make a point of clarification.
Yeah.
The goal in being very conservative with this year's budget is because last year you approved a budget to draw down your funds. So that was a conscious effort to dip into your 1.3 years of savings. This year's budget is trying to take a more balanced approach since the town decided to purchase the properties and we still want to keep at least a year's worth of budget in reserves. So it's being more fiscally conscious of the potential drop in revenue due to the nature of marijuana sales tax and sales tax in general, and watching how to be more balanced. Also, I think the goal, especially with the 3-year CIP capital improvement budget, is to find large scale projects that we know we will have to expend in the future and offsetting them with grant opportunities and finding innovative ways to fund those large projects that we know we have coming up.
Yeah, I fully understand. I just was trying to work together on if community members are saying, you know, we're going to be broke or whatever, what their solutions were. You know, like if
Mhm.
we need to cut the events out, if we need to cut tree programs, like what options are, you know, your voting base coming to you with ideas? I guess I was just going to see if there was something on there that they're, you know, coming to you about that we could bring to the table and discuss.
I have a council member who's attending remotely who's going to call in to share her thoughts as well. So if Councilmember Dennis, whenever you're ready, I'll give you the floor, but then I'll continue moving forward. There you are. Okay. You have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on, the salary for the police. I feel like one of our council goals was public safety. And by not allowing them to get the salary that they've been told that they were going to get is only going to drive people away. We are already very limited on our resources. And I would hate to see our public safety dip because we don't allow for that expenditure. We have to keep that in mind because we don't want to see, the neighborhood become less safe because we didn't budget correctly. I feel like there's other options for us. There's other areas that we might be able to cut back, but I feel like it's very unwise to even consider a salary freeze for the police department. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you. What's the rough dollar number that we're saving in the budget for by making that proposal? What happens to the budget if that goes back in roughly? Are we talking, because in the past, I think that the way that we talked about it historically, and I mean, this is historical conversation. So there's, you're getting up to speed on this as we're speaking right now. So I don't expect you to have this information just at your fingertips and in your head. But the way that we've talked about it at this table is that each officer who is not a command staff person costs the town roughly $100,000. And one of the things we did is we said, rather than having 12 officers in our best heyday of days, when we really did have a lot of revenue coming in every year that we were not spending every year, we had 12 sworn officers and we went down to 10 and we are currently at 8. And if we freeze and stay at 8, are we thinking about freezing and staying at 8, or are we thinking about freezing and staying at 10? Is that how can we talk about numbers a little bit so that we have some context for the impact?
So the current plan would be to have a salary freeze for fiscal 2026 and stay at 8 officers.
And the research behind that was looking at wages of similar sized municipalities in the area and what we're paying versus them, and just putting a halt on any pay increases for 12 months until we can look and see what the revenues end up doing.
In terms of AVIS and the lodging tax.
AVIS, the lodging tax, and marijuana.
Mm-hmm. What if would council be more comfortable with the concept if we said it's not a full year, it's a 3-month, and then we look at it again? Or it's a 6-month freeze, and then we look at it again? Or instead of it's a full freeze, it's okay, we're going to give a half step instead of a full step to our 8 officers who stay. Something like that. If we came back to the table with a number that was not a complete freeze, was a shorter term option, like, does that help council? And how do our other 2 council members feel about
I feel like our police officers are pretty well compensated and we have some of the best benefits around. And even with that said, I still think the reason we have turnover is because that's just kind of the normal flow of things. People come here and they get their great training and do a good job. And then they want to find some more action and they go elsewhere with that great training. And I just think I think the chief can speak to that.
It's absolutely true. Yeah, it's uh, with a department this size, you're going to have turnover, and I believe that you're absolutely correct. I do think that they are well compensated. I do. I think for 12 months would bring the salaries back in line. I can tell you from doing some of the research with Charity, this department is incredibly hard to do that with. When you see a department that's 12 square blocks or that's got between 8 and 10 officers, they're usually an hour drive from here. You know, they're super small. Basalt, places like that. I mean, they're super small in a very rural area. It's super hard to judge this because you can't go off of a salary survey from 2025 from Lakewood. I mean, it's just not, it's apples and oranges. So I do think at the current rate, I mean, I can tell you that based on from 2023 to 2025, Edgewater has not increased from what I found from CML. They have not had a pay increase since 2023.
They have their rates on their website,
Yeah.
so we can be really clear about that. We are competitive with Edgewater right now, our police rates.
The starting pay, absolutely. The mid-range pay, we're a little low on, but again, they haven't had a raise. We're still a little below them. They haven't, from what CML has on their website, they have not had a pay increase since 2023.
Do they pay 100% of the benefit?
They do.
For the family members as well?
As far as I remember, yes.
Okay. Councilmember Lasher?
I just was gonna say, I'm fine with for like the pay freeze. I just know that maybe a year ago, we were in a situation where like 3 officers left at the same time and we had 6 officers and everyone was trying to cover. And so it's like, that was more my concern, over the pay raise is like, if we have 3 officers leave, it's like, we're not flipping burgers here. Like, this is a job where you're risking your lives every day. So that was more my concern, is just keeping 8, not the 10. But
Yeah.
again,
Councilmember Debner?
I guess I would be in support of the staff recommendation to freeze. I think, it sounds like they put a lot of research and work into that. So I want to thank you guys for doing that and considering, the budget circumstance that we're in. I was wondering, so I believe earlier this year, the council had approved like 2 additional officers, if I remember correctly. And I guess I was kind of wondering if you could speak to, at that time, what the staffing levels were and how that fits in. Is that?
Absolutely. So our ultimate goal with having 10 was to have 2 officers on each shift. So right now, as we are today, we run a single officer for 4 hours a night. So the ultimate goal for having the other 2 was to have 2 officers working pretty much all the time.
Thank you.
And I think that relying on our council goals as like our North Star, right, is incredibly important. And in conjunction with, we've got staff members who have done the research who are speaking about their own pay as well here. Like, if they're willing to say to their own staff, this
Wait,
is what we should
just so
do.
we're clear, that includes me too.
Right.
That's not just, yeah.
It's a serious recommendation to come to the table and make that recommendation to council. And I think we have been competitive for a long time now. For a couple of years, we've been very competitive with our rates and our benefits. And I think we have successfully gotten the word out that this is a good department to work for. We needed that at that point. I'm not happy with this, but I can understand it and I support it and I believe it's the right thing to do. And I think that it's possible that that will change. I think of it as like you ramp one thing up while you ramp one thing down at the same time, because you're always, like Councilmember Debner said, keeping a close eye on things. And you're trying to calibrate as closely as you can to the present circumstances. And so we're currently working hard on trying to develop more financial revenue sources for the town. That work directly impacts this. That's why we're doing that work. And that's why it's urgent. That's why. Because it directly impacts our safety. If we don't have enough sustainable financial resources from enough different sources so that we don't rely on one industry, we have to look at other options. What else do we do? So we've got to work hard to move those projects forward, and then understand the impacts of the changes as they come, the lodging tax and the AVIS revenue could impact this. And if that changes and things, look different, then staff will know that because they're keeping a close eye on it. Do you feel like with 8 officers, the town is safe?
Mayor, I do. I think there's definitely going to be a gap there where there's someone working by themselves, which doesn't make me sleep very good at night sometimes, but I do believe that there's support in the area to help if we need it. I can tell you that nothing's perfect. I don't. Councilmember last year mentioned that, with turnover and people leaving, if they're determined to want to do something different in their career, I don't think 12 months is going to make that much of a difference, to be completely honest with you.
Mhm.
I can tell you it wasn't a pleasant conversation, but I can tell you that they went out of their way to make me feel better about it.
Right, right. And I mean, what happened the other month when we had not enough officers because of various circumstances, you did a shift.
Yeah, I'm a working chief.
Yeah.
I work. I actually like it. So, yeah.
Other concerns or questions or questions for staff about this proposed budget?
I mean, I know we have historically dipped into like the revenues to hire the additional officers, but just something we can't. I was fine with it then as a one-time thing, but it's really hard to stomach doing it again a second year in a row, given the circumstances. So it feels like a really hard thing to say.
No, it wasn't it wasn't something we came to lightly. And
Right.
I can tell you the conversation that we had was this: if they're, after doing all this for the last, well, since you started here a month ago, I feel really bad for you, but a month ago, we started looking for a solution. If there was one, we would have found it. I think this is, as an administrator, I know it's hard to, maybe it's hard to believe that I'm going to, well, I'm not going to vote myself out of a raise, but I mean, to take on that load, I think it's necessary right now.
And I will say, I've worked with several police chiefs, and this is probably the only one I've ever worked with that has brought this type of solution to me. And so that speaks volumes of your chief's professionalism.
Yeah. I think your point that last year, when we made that decision, I think that's a really important point. Nobody envisioned it as something that we did again and again and again. It was, let's work to get the revenue sources moving and diversified, and let's use these funds this time.
And we have been working towards that
And we
since
have.
we made that decision. We've been working towards diversifying the revenue source.
Mhm.
But I mean, really, it just makes it crystal clear that that's what we need to do.
Right.
If we want to have 10 sworn officers, we need to be able to have the funds to support that.
And I just think that's the most important point from this entire conversation. And we'll learn more as we go. So
We
thank
always
you.
do.
Yeah.
And who's to say, I mean, we can always do a budget amendment mid-year. If our revenues do end up tracking upward, we pass the lodging tax, then we can reevaluate things later. But I would feel better passing a budget that's a little more restrictive from the get-go until we have some of those variables figured out.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to tighten the belt than it is, or sorry, to loosen the belt than it is to tighten it.
Mhm.
What do we think about moving, I know Councilmember Lasher is interested in this part of the conversation. How do you guys feel, and Councilmember Dennis, about using the Conservation Trust Fund to offset the cost of taking care of the park?
Can you remind me what the dollar number was for the park maintenance?
Yeah, it's just on this one,
Let's-
Kathleen or Bailey.
On the cover
Oh,
sheet?
Yeah, it's just park maintenance is 17,633 and then it's proposed 34.
So we could take that 34 out, that entire
Mhm.
34 out of Conservation Trust Fund?
For 1 year.
And where would that leave? I can't remember what the end balance was in the Conservation Trust Fund. Like, where would that leave that end balance?
See, your Conservation Trust Fund balance right now, if you take nothing out of it, is projected to be 83,000 next year.
Yeah, so 83 minus 34.
So you'd still have
83.
about 50,000.
Which is still, if we're gonna do, if it turns out that we need to do some changes to the park, we still have, 50,000 in that, and which is a match for a grant for that kind of work. That would be something that we would go out to a grant for. We would try hard to get something, and 50,000 is still a substantial number to match a grant.
Guess I'm more inclined just to keep the funds in the Conservation Trust Fund. It just maybe seems a little neater in my mind to, not have like services pulling from that. Although I would be interested, I don't know, is there like a policy or like scope of how we would use these funds potentially?
We don't have one in place, and I think that would probably be a discussion for, a council retreat after the new council seated.
Well, there's a state law about it because it's
Yep.
voter
Right.
mandated funds in terms of like what we could use the money for, but we don't have an internal policy about it. What we've done is historically, we've saved those funds thinking that down the road, we would use them for a playground or park improvements, big capital expenses.
I guess in my mind, I've heard from the public the importance of having a good playground. And I know, it sounds like the current condition, it should last for a few years. But it might be, nice to just kind of have that tucked away in the event that we need that down the road. It's kind of my thinking.
Mayor Pro Tem, how do you feel on it?
I could really go either way, but I've typically just been inclined to leave it and for like a time when we have a big project, and it just gives us that much more flexibility with matching funds for a big project.
Is that the advantage, is matching funds if you use the Conservation Trust Fund? I guess I'm not so familiar with, the restrictions on that fund. So if you could kind of give an overview based on what we know.
Do you have any way to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, we would have to look at the tax language, but I believe it can only be used on the purchase of open space or the purchase or maintenance of parks.
It's very limited.
It's super limited. So it has to be like a public park or open space, I think, essentially. Probably trails too, but I don't know if that would be applicable here.
I mean, to me, when we're talking about the need to freeze salaries and only have 8 officers instead of 10, $50,000 or $34,000 is 1/3 of an officer. And using those funds for park maintenance makes sense to me. It doesn't drastically impact the savings, but it does have a $34,000 impact on the general fund that's positive. And given the current circumstances, I think it's a good decision to use those funds, but it's council's decision.
I'm just trying to be respectful for the community members that feel like we're not doing a good job being fiscally responsible. So that's why I backed it. I've always wanted to save it for a park once we build the town hall or decide. But when you have community members that are upset how the council's doing it, that's why I brought it up.
I mean, it makes sense that you'd use the money that is for the park on the park.
Yeah.
Where does our park maintenance come out of the budget currently?
General.
General.
Just a general fund?
Mhm.
So that's why, like, if we're looking at the general fund closely and trying to keep that bottom number as low as possible, this is one of, like, what Councilmember Lasher came to the table with was saying, okay, we respect how much staff has worked to find different ideas, to look closely at what's possible, and to be conservative in their thinking as they bring this proposed budget forward. What other ideas are there? And I think this is one. So it really depends on where council falls, how to weigh it. And if Councilmember Dennis has a feeling about has a thought about the Conservation Trust Fund, feel free to call in and share your thoughts on that. Are there other questions for our staff on the budget, or are we ready to sort of move it forward? Councilmember Duggar.
So, we're kind of taking a conservative approach this year. I imagine that has to do with decreasing revenues and increasing expenses just in general. I think one of the, items for a second reading is the mayor pay raise topic. And, I guess one concern is, is there any public services that is different from that we maybe offered in the prior years that this budget wouldn't necessarily support? I'm thinking of community events are always, appreciated by the public. And I wonder what the proposed budget, how it's different this year compared to last year in regards to that.
I did not make any changes to the community events budget.
Okay.
I can speak on that. Last year I think we took 50 grand off or something, like 30 grand off of our events to bring it down. And I'm fine taking it down more to be, more in line. And so
We could go to I think the big thing, and to his credit, Administrator Beltran emphasized this over and over and over again, right? We can nickel and dime the smaller numbers of $30,000 for trees, $10,000 for the Gazette. But the thing that really is impactful is the salaries and benefits. And I think that staff's done a really good job of presenting a conservative budget that lands where it needs to land. So I personally would move the conservation trust funds over to pay for park maintenance. But again, that's a little bit of nickel and diming, and the impact is 34,000. So we could look at events. The impact is 15,000 because we're not going to not throw a picnic. We're always going to throw an annual picnic. Maybe we're not going to have Taco Tuesdays and movie nights,
And
but if
one other
that's what
thing
council wants to
I
do.
would like to know is I did not change anything in the benefits line item. I am still working with a couple other brokers to see if we can provide a more cost-effective benefits plan, but I did not have those numbers before I presented this to you this evening.
So are we comfortable? We have on the, I want to just thank our town clerk for the work that she did on the cover sheets for each of our agenda items. She has a council staff report on the budget, right? Which talks about the purpose of this conversation, the background, the analysis, the financial impacts, the options, what staff recommends. And I really appreciate the clarity of that cover sheet. I think it's very helpful. So bottom line for this workshop, we're looking at the options, which is page 2 of 3 for that cover sheet. We need either staff direction to move the budget as proposed forward to first reading at the September 15th meeting, or direct staff to incorporate modifications prior to bringing it. Councilmember
Yes.
Stebner.
So I had one thought. I really appreciate the capital improvement plan. I was wondering though, how does kind of the 10-year plan that Dave had put together with the street repaving, how that fits into, you know, kind of projected spending? If, I don't know, it might make sense, at least in my mind, to have kind of all of our big expenses that we're like planning on spending together in one spot. I don't know if that'd be something that we could maybe incorporate.
I think when you have a 3-year capital improvement plan, like it's a very fluid document year to year. So what I'm presenting for this year is to put aside the $25,000 for the architectural services, and right now the $15,000 for the zoning code update. And then looking at it a little more abstract. So the 27 and the 28 capital improvement plan are not hard set budgetary numbers in this budget, but we can always incorporate that for the next fiscal year into the capital improvement plan. I think right now, starting from the ground level, I want to make at least a clear step forward with these concrete plans of how we're going to move forward with the purchases that the council made.
When we bring a new public works coordinator to the table, we'll make sure that he's got that 10-year infrastructure plan in his purview and we'll integrate it. Other thoughts? Are we ready to move forward? We're going to leave it as is? Or do you want to direct staff to make a change?
I mean, what are the council's thoughts on doing the park maintenance out of the Conservation Trust Fund?
Can Councilmember Dennis, you want to ask?
Councilmember Dennis, do you have thoughts on moving the Conservation Trust funds from the 34,000 from Conservation Trust Fund to the general fund to pay for park maintenance? Thumbs up. So she wants to do that. For the record, she's remote, gave us a thumbs up. So we've got some hesitation. We're on the fence there, I think. Where do you fall on that, Councilmember Debner?
I guess, could we maybe, so I'm looking at the 2025 budget and there's, you know, total park maintenance, right? There's like arborist, lawn and garden maintenance, irrigation repair, and park, like, I guess I'm wondering how much part, like, what does park maintenance exactly entail? You know, I know Dave's not here. He'd be the perfect one to ask, but
Would it be helpful if I actually dug up those line items from our accounting software and see what we actually spent versus what we budgeted? I mean, right, so we want to have the funds available to use them if we need them, but we don't necessarily always use them every year. And so I can give you an analysis of historically what's actually being spent out of those line items versus what's budgeted, and then we can go from there.
I mean, it just feels like very micromanagey to me. And it's like, I feel like at some point, like we just need to like trust, you know, like you or whoever's in this position to like write a budget for us, look at it, you know, not like want breakdowns of like every single detail. Yes, I think that's important on some things, but it's like, you know, how much work, like how many hours would that cause you to do? Like, you know, it seems like your plate is already full. So it's like, I'd rather just not put the 34, take it out and just keep it like it is. So then we're not paying you for like work that you already have so much to do.
And I would also say on that point, if we budget to spend it out of that fund and we don't, then you just have a larger fund balance at the end of the year.
It pays for maintaining the grass and maintaining the flowers and maintaining the playground, the mulch, those kinds of things. And it's pretty much all around, because I've watched what that budget item goes to. It's pretty much all around town hall. But if we were to say create park space, say we wanted to create a little parklet somewhere in the middle of town, that would also be the same budget item, but we don't have anything like that. So it really just goes to the park around town hall and maintaining it.
Thank you. That's what I was wondering.
It's water, it's the water sprinklers, that system, turning the water on and off every season. When we need to repaint the gazebo or spot paint the park benches, it pays for that.
I'd rather you spend your time on the DOLA grant.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah, I would agree. I was just more curious, just for an understanding. Since we are kind of doing, I guess you could maybe say money shuffling or like, but I guess just budgeting in general. And, you know, in the event that anyone is wondering, you know, what that's for, I just think it was valuable to have that.
Okay to ask questions. Okay, so we're going to move it forward as is. We have general thumbs up for that. We're not making that direction to use the conservation trust funds, or we are?
I'm okay with it being spent on park maintenance.
We have 3 yeses. Then let's move it to the general fund.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Then I think we have our staff direction for that item. And we will continue with our workshop. We're at the fee schedule discussion. Thank you for all your hard work on that for both Chief Nesbitt and our town clerk. So we're now going to review the proposed fiscal year 2026 fee schedule. These fees covered things like permits, services, and programs that help fund our operations. Previous councils have put many of these fees into our actual code, and we've slowly been pulling them out as we touch that section of the code so that we can adopt it by resolution rather than having to change the actual code with 2 readings of an ordinance in order to update the fee. So what we did last year is we just did a restatement of the fee sheet. And we listed the reference to the code. Was it in the code or was it someplace else that allowed us to change it? So the document that you have in your packet that looks like this has red lines around it. Those red lines are the things that we can change this year by resolution. And they're not enormously impactful on the bottom line, but it is something that is sort of like routine maintenance that we should look at our fees every year. And then we readopt them and we publish them. So we're trying to get into more of a habit of doing that annually. There are 2 things that I know we need to update. The public records requests have not been updated. The fees that the town charges for public records requests have been raised by the state. The state allows a limit of something like 41, I think. The first hour is free. And then after that, there's an hourly rate if it requires more staff time. And I know that we haven't raised it in at least 4 years, and that at some point during those 4 years, the state raised that fee. And so it's my recommendation that we look at whether or not we should increase that fee. Right now, the town charges $35 instead of what the state allows for. $41.37 per hour. So we need council direction as to whether or not you guys want to update that.
I do.
And we also need, we've got another thumbs up from our remote participant. In general, are we in favor of moving those numbers?
I mean, staff salaries have increased, so.
Exactly.
They're paying for the service, so. Right.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a money-making thing, it's a cost recovery thing.
And then we didn't adopt a fee for renewing the guard cards when there are security guards that get a license to carry a gun in town when they're working in our dispensaries or anywhere in town. We don't have that renewal fee in our code or in our fee sheet. So we wanted to make sure that that gets in there for this first reading when we bring it back to you guys. Those 2 things I'm aware of. When council looked through all of these, well, let's just say, other than that, the fees, like you said, are supposed to reflect the actual staff time spent on the work required, and that staff has suggested we can go through and do sort of maybe just a percentage raise to all of them to reflect the change in the salary. Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, so the legal requirement here, which is actually fairly complicated, but generally what it comes down to is that it has to be roughly proportional and bear an essential nexus to the service that you're trying to ameliorate the impact of. So generally, you want to be charging fees that are roughly proportional to the cost the town has in administering that service. So it makes sense. A lot of my clients just update them every year in accordance with how much they're raising their salaries. We haven't done that for some time, so we're probably behind by several percentage points.
Okay. And I think that your staff report does a really good job of speaking to why you have these kinds of fees in the first place. Could you pull that out of the staff report and speak to that? Like, why do we charge a fee for something that one person is asking for?
Well, I mean, essentially, you are doing office administrative work for the community based off of services that the community needs. And so as you're doing those tasks, it needs to offset the cost that you're charging for those. So, I mean, in other jurisdictions I worked at, it's $5 for a sales tax license and you're processing 1,500 sales tax licenses annually. That does not offset the staff time to create the license, process the application, mail out the license, manage the databases, all of those things. I would say moving forward, recommendation would be once you have those fees set and adjusted to be adequate, then you would follow whatever COLA increase regionally to add based off of reflective of what your salary increase is going to be. So if your Denver CPI index tells you it's a 2.8% increase, then you would increase your fees 2.8%. But as Austin mentioned, because we're several percentage points behind, this is going to take more research to see what is going to be equitable for staff time.
And big picture, I
Please.
can. Just to add on to that, like why you charge for these services is if you don't, then the entire community is going to bear the burden. So for instance, when you're pulling a business license, it's either that business owner who's applying for that license is going to pay for it, or the entire community is going to subsidize it.
Thank you. Okay, so we're okay moving that one forward? Councilmember
Yeah, I just
Mayor
had one
Pro Tem?
quick question. I'm noticing, of course, a lot of fees that are still tied into the actual code. And I know historically, if we touch the code, we take it out and we fix it, but is that still the recommended? I mean, because I feel like if we don't pull them out of the code and put them in the fee schedule, like that's just money we're not recouping from services that people are getting, and again, the town is going to be subsidizing the cost of those. So what's the recommendation? I feel like there's a lot in here that is still.
Kind of goes back to my Gordian knot analogy.
Yeah.
Whenever we've touched a section in the code, the mayor and I's perspective has been fix that whole section. But if we're not touching it, don't go through the code to make those comprehensive changes elsewhere. So that's been our tact. But of course, if council wants to do something different, and you have 2 examples just today, if you want to go through and pull out all of the fees from your code, that way you can just adopt them all by a schedule of fees by resolution and update it annually to make sure it is in line with the actual costs. We could do that.
Do we have a sense for how often like these other fees are being subsidized by the community? In terms of the ones that are in the code and not as part of a fee schedule?
Yeah, I mean, some of these code sections probably haven't been touched since they've been created several decades ago.
And I wonder if we could start with the ones that like we actually are seeing and maybe like, you know, if we don't
Court costs.
I feel like if we could start with the ones that are the low hanging fruit, the ones that are really being subsidized by the community and fix those, that seems more fair. And the ones that we don't really see all that often, maybe those are down the line when we're flush with cash and can redo everything.
So I guess the question would be, would the direction be address or identify all of those issues in the fee schedule? We'll still adopt everything by resolution and then make a staff project for next year to readdress all of the code pieces? Or are we wanting to tackle this while we set the budget?
I don't know if we have time to do it while we're trying to set the budget. So again,
Good
Joel was great
question.
to come up too. So
Town attorney to just
I
walk
think
away.
I think Austin was gonna offer that. No,
That's why I asked.
yeah, no, no, sorry, I wasn't saying right now. I was just saying like, sooner rather than later, but I'm not in this budget cycle, but just as we're talking about it, this is all coming in my head and I'm like, I'm wondering, how often do these ones that are in the code and they're not reflecting the true cost of staff time?
Transfer of ownership, there are ones that when we transfer the utility bills, that's very time consuming. It just takes time. And right now there's a lot of, properties that they're changing hands. And so that might be one. And then court fees. I think the way that our clerk just put it there, we
Yeah.
could propose sort of the larger schedule for that as an independent project and put it on our staff work plan for the next year. Cause it could be impactful.
I mean, it seems like it would affect the budget. I mean, maybe not in a huge way, but it would. It also just makes sure that people that are using the service are paying the costs.
Yeah.
I would say functionality wise, it would be best to maybe have that a goal to have an updated fee schedule that's all set by resolution for next year's budget. So that gives
Mhm.
staff at least a year to pre-plan this and get all of the ordinances in place prior to.
I think that would be amazing.
And it's right in keeping with our council goals. It's
Professionalization.
absolutely in keeping with those goals.
Yeah.
So the options are direct staff to bring the updated fee schedule as proposed back for adoption by resolution at the September 15th meeting. And there would be specific numbers that we would bring to council for adoption for the ones that we can change. Or direct staff to make modifications. And it sounds like we're saying, let's add that bigger term project to next year's or take no action. So it sounds like
Moving forward.
moving forward.
My
Mhm.
thoughts.
Thank you. And I've got a thumbs up from our council member who's attending remotely. Thank you. We are moving on to agenda item number 7, which is the mayor report on public comments from August 18th combined meeting. So I just want to touch on this a little bit. The purpose of the public comment is to give residents an opportunity to be heard and to place comments on the public record. The council during public comments does not engage in back and forth discussion during these portions of the meetings, but we do listen really carefully. The response in your packet was drafted at the request of residents from the August 18th, 2025 meeting. Because the request was that when I followed up, that I respond to everybody rather than just responding to that individual. That work to respond in that way was, I think, well worth it in this case. And I don't want to do it again. It took hours. I would say it took 6 or 7 hours minimum. I think I'm being conservative there to really listen as closely as possible and make sure that I responded to every single thing. And I hope that everybody who asked for responses takes the time to read that response, because it was really intended to put to rest some of the concerns that had come up at that last meeting. So my hope is that everybody who had concerns understands that I was genuinely grateful for the opportunity to clarify some of the misunderstandings and respond back, but that's not the best use of our public comment time. Moving forward, I'd like to remind the residents that questions that can be answered with simple factual information may be clarified by staff in the future at meetings, or we'll refer a question to a staff at that moment. I might say, if somebody says, my right of way has a big dip in it, and I think there's a broken water thing, I would refer that to our staff and say, somebody on staff will follow up with you for that comment. But other questions that are just clarifying, like, when did this happen? Or how did this happen? Or why is this the way it is? That's why we have those community forums. We designed those community forums for that kind of conversation, that back and forth. We specifically scheduled those community forums for that kind of conversation. So I really hope we're also always available via text and email, and I'm always available for a coffee date. I encourage anybody to reach out for that kind of conversation. Let's not have the public comment periods turn into that kind of back and forth. It's not healthy. We can do better. Issues that do require more research that aren't just like a discussion, we will go ahead and ask you to reach out and to staff and say, like, I have a question, I need clarification on this. We value your participation very, very much. And I'm heartened by the amount of attendance, the amount of engagement that we have in our community right now. That's been a goal for this council for a long time. I think it's a good thing. I think there are growing pains from it. I think that as we start to build a better, comprehensive, shared understanding of what we're doing and why, that will only get better. And I would encourage everybody to continue to participate and attend and share your thoughts as we move forward. I hope that we can all listen. I think one of the most powerful things that was said at the August 18th meeting was that one attendant said that she came with curiosity now. And I just love that. And I just want to highlight that comment, because I think coming with curiosity brings us to a better place. And I appreciate your continued engagement. With that, I'm going to go on to our future agenda schedule. And you have that in your packet. I think there's a little bit that's new. Get my readers on for this. So we want to make sure that the council is aware of what this schedule is going to be in your meeting packets, to make sure that the council is aware of what's coming up and have an opportunity to prepare, and also to add your thoughts, right? And ask for things that you want to have on future meeting agendas. This is your opportunity to say, could we put something specific on the meeting agenda? So as always, residents are also welcome to provide public comments about that specific idea. If they have something that they would like the council to consider, that could be something that they could say in their public comments. That being said, are there any council additions or changes that you'd like to see to this future agenda schedule? Mayor Pro Tem.
I just don't know when I can get it together, but I was hoping to have like a sort of a brief presentation on kind of more of what the Denver Regional Council of Governments is and why it's important that Mountain View is in it. I've got a lot on my plate, and I'm trying to figure out when I can pull that together, so I don't want to do it a disservice by rushing it. So I just not sure what makes the most sense for that.
Do you want to put it in a parking lot kind of area?
Maybe, yeah, if we could.
And should we put the parking lot, should we add a parking lot where we have like the fee schedule, the DRCOG presentation, both of those things? And then maybe also, we don't know exactly where this is going to go, but a presentation about the zoning, the need for the zoning changes, what's happened historically, so that we can present maybe a 20-minute presentation about that, informative. Note that there is a workshop at 10-6 workshop for a Cora workshop and a Gazette discussion. That's based on prior comments from the public that the Gazette content didn't feel balanced. So we want council to tell us, how do you guys want to do the Gazette content? Let's come up with a policy that tells staff how to do the Gazette content. So I encourage you to start thinking about that. One of the advantages of this future agenda schedule is that you can start thinking about it ahead of time and talking to your constituents.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm really appreciative of this future agenda schedule. I know speaking for myself definitely will help me prepare for the meetings, and I think that's a great service for our residents is having council, have a heads up what we're going to talk about, so that way everyone at the table can kind of do research and bring the best ideas forward.
And you have to be a little flexible because things come up.
Right.
So we're not married to this, but we're engaged.
And they get the packet just like we do at the exact same
Mhm.
time. That
Yeah,
Thursday.
about 100 people get the packet right now. Yeah, 100 email addresses. And of those 100 people, many of them are couples. And so it's really more than that because one person in the couple gets the packet and they share it. Other ideas or thoughts that you want to add to the parking lot or to the schedule as it's currently drafted?
I guess one thought I had, kind of in line with our council goals this year of growing our professionalism is maybe trying to identify what sort of policy gaps that, we may have. I mean, just as, I've done some research and it looks like some municipalities have a little bit further development in policy, and that's kind of a background that I come from professionally. So I'd love to offer my expertise and assistance with that, whether that be a committee to, kind of develop that content. But I'm here to serve. I mean, it might be more of a brainstorming session. And, everyone at the table here has been at council a lot longer and maybe has better ideas as far as, what policy gaps we can kind of like plug just to give structure and continuity for government, no matter who's in office.
Right. I think that maybe this is a conversation for the two of us so that I share with you where we currently have policies and why we prioritize those policies so we're currently coming to the table. The big one is that purchasing policy, that was a huge hole that the town had never had, to my knowledge. And so that's like the really big one that's going to be very impactful. And we need to move that one forward with Finance Committee. And we've done over the last 5 to 7 years, we've done a number of smaller policies, but what was that?
We just did addressing.
Addressing, that's right. We did addressing and we did the financial policy for how much money we needed to keep in reserves.
You did your rules, your ethic code. You also did a new one for hearings for councilwoman Scalda.
That's right. So let's have some time just talking about sort of the outlines of the work that the town does and where you see maybe what could be most impactful. What is the biggest priority for you in terms of a policy before we throw it out to the whole community?
Okay, that
Okay.
works. Yeah, we can meet.
Great.
Can I just
Thank
make
you.
a statement?
Yep.
Should we all keep our goals or can we turn them back in and then get them every meeting? I think it'd be really helpful to have them sitting in front of each council member each time. So then when we go to vote for things, then we can make sure that it's still in line with our goals. I think that could be really helpful.
That's a great idea. I really like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want us to keep them or if you want to keep them or print them or.
I can make sure you have a copy each meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, we do that with the public comment rules as well, because it's hard to remember every little thing like that. And I think that is a really valuable thing to have at the table to help us stay focused. Thank you for that.
I can also add it to the packet too.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
let's add it to the packet, to every packet.
Great.
Okay. We are then moving forward. We have reached the end of our agenda. There being no further business to come before this council for tonight's workshop, may I hear a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
We're hereby adjourned at 8:29 PM. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to the members of the public who attended tonight. Appreciate you guys.